Hey there. Tonight we are going back to Courtship in Victorian England, a world where a single love letter, found in the wrong pocket, could ruin a young lady for good, where a man who proposed and then changed his mind could be sued in front of a jury, while his letters were read aloud to a packed courtroom, and where every wedding in the country was illegal after noon, and over the whole of it, from the first bow in the street to the wedding morning, one rule outranked all the others. The two people falling in love were never, at any point, to be left alone together. Before we begin, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And leave a comment telling me where in the world you are listening from, and what time it is there. Somehow, it is always 2 in the morning somewhere. Now, dim the lights. Put on a fan if you like that soft wash of white noise. Settle into your pillow. Let your shoulders come down. And let the day go. Because tonight, there is no chaperone in the corner of your room. Nobody is reading anything into anything, and you may fall asleep entirely unsupervised. Have you ever wondered how two people who were never once left alone in a room managed to know each other well enough to promise a whole life? Why a young man was free to send a lady roses and a box of chocolate creams, but a pair of gloves would have scandalized her mother? What it meant when a bouquet arrived at the door tied upside down? Why nobody was ever supposed to congratulate a newly engaged woman? Only the man. Why brides posted slices of their own wedding cake across the country in little white boxes. And the strangest question of all, in a world where a respectable man could not so much as speak to a respectable woman without being introduced by a third party, how did a weekly London newspaper fill page after page with complete strangers advertising for husbands and wives? And did a single one of those advertisements ever actually end at an altar? And now, congratulations. You have just woken up in the front bedroom of a tall brick house in Abingdon, in Berkshire, on a Wednesday morning in April 1872. You are 21 years old, your name is Violet, and you are the eldest daughter of the town doctor, which in a town this size makes you visible, respectable, and comfortably middle class. 3 things that are about to matter more than you would believe. Downstairs are your mama, your sister Kate, who is 16 and not yet out, and therefore officially invisible, and your Aunt Louisa, your mother's unmarried sister, who lives with you and notices everything. And on the hall table, there is a small stiff white card, left yesterday afternoon by a young solicitor named Mr. Blake, whom Mrs. Hartwell herself presented to your mamma at the spring ball on Friday, and who danced with you twice that evening, and did not ask for a third, which, if you understood what he was doing, and you did, was itself a message. Best behavior. Now. The town is watching. The first thing to understand about what has just begun is that it is not, whatever the novels on your bedside table say, a private matter. Courtship in your England is the most public thing a private person can do. It is conducted in parlours with the door open, on lawns in full view, in churches, at dinner tables, under the eyes of mothers, aunts, servants, neighbours and the woman across the road, whose entire retirement is other people, and it is public on purpose, because of what it is underneath the roses. A marriage in 1872 is close to irreversible. A wife's property and person pass largely into her husband's keeping, and there is no meaningful way back out for either of them, which means that choosing is the one move in the whole game that cannot be taken back. Your century has looked at those stakes and drawn a perfectly logical conclusion. A decision that permanent should not be made by 2 dazzled young people alone in the dark. So it never is. Everyone you love and several people you merely tolerate will be in the room, so to speak, for the entire 19 months this is going to take. That is not a figure I chose at random, Violet. From the night a man first writes his name on a girl's dance card to the morning she signs her own name for the last time. A courtship of your class, done properly, at the proper speed, with the proper pauses, takes somewhere between 1 year and 3. The future will conduct its entire romances, beginning to end, in less time than your mother will spend deciding whether Mr. Blake may take you boating. And before you sigh at any of that, which you will, several times before September, be fair to the machine, because the machine has reasons. Nobody can check a stranger's character with an office or a telephone call. There are no records to search, no photographs to compare. No way of knowing whether the charming man newly arrived in town has a rising practice or 3 abandoned fiancées and debts in 4 counties, and both kinds arrive on the same train, wearing the same coat. So your world does its checking the only way it can. Slowly, socially, in the open, through introductions that put a known person's honor behind every new acquaintance, through calls that let a whole family inspect a suitor at 15-minute intervals, through a pace so deliberate that a fraud, a temper, or a bottle habit has time to show itself before anything is signed. The chaperone in the corner is not there because your age believes young people are wicked. She is there because your age believes, with some evidence, that everything important should happen in front of witnesses, and that love, of all the important things, is the one most likely to lie on its application. Breakfast, then, and the card on the hall table comes in with the toast, and you should watch your mama handle it, because you are watching a professional. She reads the card, which says nothing but his name, Mr. Arthur Blake, in plain engraved copperplate, and from that nothing she extracts everything. That he called at the correct hour, that he asked for her and not for you, which is the whole point, since a young man calls upon the mother, and only ever officially upon the mother. That he left 1 card and did not presume to stay, it being far too early in the acquaintance for staying. Papa, behind his newspaper, contributes the intelligence that young Blake is junior partner now at the firm in Bath Street that handles half the property in town, that old Mr. Harding speaks well of him, that his people are a clergyman's family out of Wantage, and you realize, somewhere around your 2nd cup of tea, that a report has been compiled on this man, quietly, between Friday night and Wednesday morning, by a committee that never once met. Kate wants to know if he is handsome. Aunt Louisa wants to know his income, and says so, out loud, because one of the small liberties of being an aunt is saying the quiet parts. And Mamma says, Louisa, in the voice that means she was wondering exactly the same thing. He is, for the record, both handsome enough and solvent enough. You said nothing at all, and nobody expected you to, and here is the first hard truth of the whole business. The opening moves of your own courtship are played entirely by other people. Your job, this week, is to have been charming on Friday, and to be at home, beautifully incidentally, when he calls again. It is worth pausing on Friday itself, because the ball is where the machine admitted him, and the machine has a doorway, and the doorway is the introduction. Mr. Blake had seen you before, Violet. Abingdon is not large. He has seen you at church for 2 years of Sundays, passed you in the marketplace, stood behind you once at the bookseller's while you took an unreasonable time choosing between 2 novels, and in all that time he could not speak 1 word to you, because in your world an unintroduced man does not exist. He cannot greet you, he cannot ask your name, he cannot contrive to drop his umbrella near you and strike up something, or rather he can, and men do. But a man who does has told everyone what he is, and a girl who answers has told them what she is, too. The whole opening of every courtship in England, therefore, runs through third parties, and young men become quiet engineers of their own luck, cultivating the friend who knows the family, angling for the dinner invitation, joining the choir with a suddenness that fools nobody. Above all, petitioning a hostess, because a hostess may introduce her guests to one another, and that is precisely what Mrs. Hartwell did on Friday, first asking your mama, in a murmur behind her fan, whether she had any objection to young Mr. Blake, an introduction being always offered to the lady's side first. Like a dish she may decline. Your mama looked across the room at him for exactly as long as it takes to value a man down to his bootlaces, and said she had no objection at all, and so he was brought over, and bowed, and you bowed, and nobody shook hands, because an unmarried lady does not offer her hand to a new acquaintance, and 14 words were exchanged about the warmth of the room. It had taken him, we may as well say it now, 1 year and 5 months to arrange those 14 words. You thought it was an evening. For him, it was a campaign. And every man in that room has run one. And every married man you know once ran one for the woman he now reads the newspaper at. And if you want to know why gentlemen of a certain age smile oddly at spring balls, it is that. Then the 2 dances, and no third. And since the arithmetic of the dance card was a whole chapter of another night, we shall only say here what the Count means to a man in Mr. Blake's position. 1 dance is nothing, a courtesy to his hostess. 3 dances is a declaration he has no right to make yet. A public claim on a girl whose family he barely knows. The sort of thing that gets a man called fast, or worse, particular. But 2, Violet. 2 is the perfect move. 2 says interested and correct in the same breath, ambition wearing its best manners, and the fact that he then spent the supper interval talking to your papa about the fishing rights above the weir, a subject in which Mr. Blake, we can now reveal, has no interest whatsoever, tells you everything about how this game is actually played. The novels say, courtship begins with a look across a crowded room. In practice, it begins with a young man laughing, slightly too warmly, at a father's story about a pike. So now he has called and left the card, and the next move is the first call proper, which happens on Friday, at 3:30, the correct hour to the minute, and you should walk through this scene slowly, because it is the basic unit of your entire courtship, the cell from which the whole organism will be grown. He is shown into the parlour. Present are your mamma, presiding at her needlework, Aunt Louisa, ostentatiously reading a book she is not reading, you, at the window with some sewing of your own, and, within 4 minutes, Kate, who has no official existence but materializes anyway and has to be sent back to her lessons with a look. Mr. Blake sits where he is put, at a courteous distance from everyone, holding his hat and gloves, which he keeps with him, the sign of a man not presuming to settle. And then, for 15 minutes, this man who has spent 1.5 years arranging to be in this room speaks to your mother about the weather, the state of the roads, the new organ at St. Helens, and the health of persons his family and yours know in common. He addresses perhaps 4 remarks to you directly. You answer them pleasantly and do not initiate. At the quarter hour he rises, precisely on time, bows to the room, expresses the hope that he may have the pleasure of calling again, which is the actual sentence the whole visit existed to deliver, and is gone, and you may think, watching the door close on him, that nothing whatever has happened. Everything has happened. Your mamma has seen his manners at close range, which in your world is character evidence of the first order. Aunt Louisa has established, by 2 questions so gentle he never felt them go in, the size of his practice and the name of his vicar. He has seen the inside of a happy, orderly house, which is what he is really shopping for. Since a man does not only marry a girl, he marries a household, a set of habits, a standard of comfort, a family's whole way of being in a room. And you have seen, and this matters more than the age will ever admit to you, whether you can bear the way he laughs. 15 supervised minutes. It will be months of these before anything is said. Courtship in your England is not a fire, Violet. It is a kettle, on the smallest flame the stove possesses. And the whole art of it is that nobody is ever allowed to say the word kettle. And spare a thought, while the kettle warms, for the man walking back down Ox Street with his hat in his hand. Because the future will tell this story, as though the rules all pressed upon the girl, and the truth is that Mr. Blake is performing under a manual of his own, every bit as thick as yours, and studied with considerably more anxiety. Since a girl is drilled in this from the nursery, and a young man mugs it up like an examination, his book tells him the correct hour to call, and the correct minute to leave, that he must go when another caller is announced, that he must keep hat and gloves about him, that he must not call again too soon, eagerness being a kind of impertinence, that he must never be seen to single you out in public beyond what the occasion licenses, and that in the presence of ladies there is to be no slang, no shop, no politics, and above all no tobacco, your century holding as an article of faith that a gentleman does not smoke in a lady's company, and the truly conscientious ones air the coat afterwards, so that half the young men of England go courting smelling faintly of their landlady's gardens. And his book costs money, Violet, which is the part nobody sees. The coat that must be good, the collars that must be laundered, the barber, the gloves, the flowers themselves, all of it found out of a junior partner's share by a man saving every spare shilling toward the very household he is calling to propose, so that courtship, for him, is a season of spending conducted in the middle of a life of scraping. But the heaviest line in his ledger is not money. Note the shape of the game you two have been dealt. Every question in it is his to ask, and every answer is yours to give. He must risk, at each stage, the call, the flowers, the dance, at last the question of questions, and you may only ever say yes or no to what is offered, which the age calls woman's privilege, and it is a privilege, and it is also the whole of your hand. And in exchange he carries the exposure, because a man refused has invested a year of evenings and hopes in front of an audience, and must now walk past that audience to the door. The code allows him one mercy on the way out, and it is absolute. A refusal is secret. A gentleman never tells where he has been refused. A lady never tells whom she has refused. Both carry the grave to the grave and the correspondence columns of the family magazines, where anxious young men write in under initials to ask whether a photograph must be returned and what precisely a certain remark at a picnic may have signified, are the nearest thing his side of the business has to a confessional. The age put the whole burden of answering upon its women and the whole burden of asking upon its men, Violet, and it is still arguing, a century and a half on, about which half of the postage was heavier. The following Tuesday, flowers arrive, and now we are properly begun, because gifts are a legal system all their own, and you could learn the entire moral architecture of your century from what a suitor may and may not send. May, flowers, always flowers, because flowers are beautiful, cost enough to compliment and nothing to compromise, and above all because they die. A bouquet leaves no trace, creates no debt, sits on no shelf accusing anybody of anything 3 years later. May also, a box of sweets, chocolate creams, or French bonbons, for the same reason, since the evidence is eaten. A book is permitted if the book itself is irreproachable, poetry being examined with particular care, and your mama will glance at the title page the way customs men glance at luggage. Sheet music is permitted, and is in fact the cleverest of all the licensed gifts, because a song must be sung, and he may then be invited to stand at the piano and hear it, and turn the pages, and page-turning, Violet, as every girl in England knows and no etiquette book will print, is the closest thing to hand-holding the parlour allows. He stands at your shoulder, he leans in at the turn, his glove brushes the sheet an inch from yours, all of it in full view, and all of it completely, maddeningly proper. But now, the other list. A young man may not send jewellery, may not send lace, may not send a shawl, a ring, a bracelet, or anything of lasting value, because a valuable gift creates obligation, and obligation is a form of ownership, and no man may own the smallest corner of a girl he has not been accepted by, and he may not send anything worn against the person, which is why the pair of gloves from the question loop would have detonated on your hall table like a small shell. Gloves touch the skin. Gloves are intimate apparel. Gloves say, I think about your hands. And a man who sends them has either proposed, in which case why has nobody told the family, or has not, in which case he has insulted you in kid leather, size 6 1/4. Your mama would return them the same afternoon. with a note of such exquisite politeness that the paper itself would be cold to the touch. And that, in your world, would very likely be that. An entire future, Violet, can be ended by a present. Fortunately for everybody, Mr. Blake sent freesias, and what freesias say brings us to one of the most charming, most misunderstood inventions of your entire century. Because your age has decided, with a perfectly straight face, that flowers are a language. On the shelf in the parlor, next to the atlas, there is a small gilt-edged book called a flower dictionary. And in it, every bloom in the garden has been issued a meaning, as though Adam had gone round a second time finishing the job. A red rose is love. Everyone knows that much. But a yellow rose is jealousy, or infidelity, depending on your edition. A striped carnation is refusal. Lavender is distrust, which seems hard on lavender. A full-blown rose placed over two buds is secrecy. And rosemary, as the oldest books and the saddest girls agree, is remembrance. And the system does not stop at the flowers themselves. The books rule on presentation the way lawyers rule on contracts. A bouquet handed over with the right hand means yes, with the left hand means no. A flower tilted toward the giver reverses its meaning entirely, so that a rose leaned the wrong way says something closer to I do not. And a bouquet presented upside down, as promised at the top of the night, means the opposite of everything in it, an entire love letter read backwards, which is why a young lady receiving flowers checks the angle of the thing before she checks the card. Kate is, at this moment, on the parlor floor with the dictionary open, decoding Mr. Blake's freesias like a clerk in the Foreign Office, and has established that freesia means lasting friendship, or possibly trust, and that mixed with white violets, and here she looks up with the expression of a girl holding a winning card. It means faithfulness. And also, Violet. It means you, because he has sent you your own name in a vase. Now, the honest footnote, because this is a history channel and not a fairy tale, and the truth here is actually better than the legend. Did the Victorians really conduct their courtships in code? Every bouquet a ciphered dispatch? Mostly, no. The dictionaries could not even agree with one another. The same flower meaning devotion in one book and deceit in its rival, so any message sent in sweet peas stood a fair chance of arriving as something else entirely, and most bouquets, then as now, meant I like you, and these were the nicest ones the glasshouse had. The flower language was a parlor game, the whole age agreed to half believe, sold in pretty editions, played mostly by sisters on parlor floors, but half believing, Violet, is not nothing. In fact, half believing is the whole engine of this chapter of your life. Because when a young man who may not write to you, may not sit near you, and may not speak one syllable of feeling in your direction chooses freesias and white violets over roses, he has thought about it. And you know he has thought about it. And he knows, you know, and neither of you can prove a thing, and nobody can be scolded, compromised or sued over a vase of flowers. The code did not need to be real to work. It only needed to be deniable, and that is the great discovery your century made about love under supervision. Meaning finds the gaps, rations speech, and flowers start talking. Watch the flowers, and something else will learn to speak, which brings us, tomorrow evening at the Hartwell's musical party, to the fan. The fan language, you will be told all your life, runs like this. A fan drawn across the cheek means I love you. A fan resting on the right cheek means yes. On the left cheek, no. A fan twirled in the left hand means we are watched. A closed fan touching the eye means when may I see you. And an open fan held over the heart means you have won me. And there are printed cards that list the whole grammar, and here is the delicious truth about them. They were advertising. The most famous of these codes were published by the fan makers themselves. Elegant little leaflets from the great Paris house of Duvleroy, tucked into the boxes like instructions with a toy, and no historian has ever caught two real lovers actually conversing in it. And when you think about it for 4 seconds, you see why. Since a code printed and sold to everyone is a code every chaperone in the room reads fluently, and a girl signaling "meet me in the conservatory" in a published alphabet might as well announce it through the orchestra. So no, Violet, you will not be semaphoring anybody tomorrow night. But watch the fans anyway, because the real fan language is older, simpler, and much more powerful than the printed one. A fan can hide a smile that has got too large. A fan can cover exactly the conversation its owner does not wish the room to lip-read. A fan, snapped shut, can end a young man's evening from 30 feet. And a fan opened slowly, over a held look, can begin one. And none of that is in any leaflet, because none of it can be printed. It is simply what happens when you give a clever woman a beautiful object, and forbid her almost every sentence she actually wishes to say. The age rationed women's words. And women, being women, promptly discovered that everything else in their hands could be made to talk. The fan, the parasol tilted just so, the glove drawn off one finger at a time while looking at nobody in particular. Your grandmothers could conduct an entire acquaintance, rise to fall, without one recorded syllable, and the men of your century, who wrote all the books and passed all the laws, never once managed to legislate a glance. And where even the glance runs out, objects step in. Because a courtship under supervision generates relics the way a pilgrimage does. And the relics of your age are two, and both would stop the future in its tracks. The first is hair. To ask a lady for a lock of her hair is a declaration pitched 1 careful inch below a proposal, and to be granted one is to be given, by your century's lights, a piece of the actual person, imperishable, unfalsifiable, warm from the head, and your age does not hide such things in drawers. Violet, it wears them. Hair braided into watch chains, hair coiled behind glass in brooches and rings, hair worked by professional artists into wreaths and initials, a whole respectable industry of love made wearable. And the future will shudder at this. And your century would look calmly back at the future, which keeps 10,000 pictures of its beloveds and cannot touch one of them, and ask who exactly is the strange one. The second relic is newer, barely 10 years old, and has already conquered every parlour in England. The photograph, the carte de visite, a portrait the size of a playing card, and every family now keeps an album of them on the parlour table, relations, friends, celebrities, the Queen herself, sold at the stationer's in her widow's cap, and the exchange of carte is the common coin of friendship. But between an unmarried lady and an unmarried gentleman, the carte is contraband of exactly the letter's class, because a photograph is not a glance. It is property, permanent, portable, showable, a face that can be produced in a smoking room to company its owner never chose, and so the rule stands. No portrait passes before the engagement does, which is why, when Mr. Blake, greatly daring, observed last month that the new photographer on the high street had done the Hartwell girls very creditably, and wondered, in a general way, whether your family had thought of sitting, your mamma replied that perhaps they might, in the spring, and the entire exchange, to any listening chaperone, concerned photography. It did not concern photography. He has asked for your face, and been told not yet, and both of you understood it perfectly. And somewhere in your own workbox, Violet, pressed flat between 2 sheets of blotting paper, there is already a freesia from a certain Tuesday vase, which is how these histories actually get written. Not in letters, which are forbidden, but in hay, the evidence of a Victorian courtship. When the boxes are opened 100 years on, is mostly flowers nobody let die and dance programs nobody threw away. An archive of things too small to be forbidden, kept by people who were never once allowed to write the sentence the whole box spells. So where, you may reasonably ask, does any of this actually happen? If he cannot write to you, cannot walk with you alone, cannot sit beside you unattended, where is a courtship physically conducted? And the answer is one of the loveliest secrets of your century. It is conducted in plain sight, inside the ordinary machinery of respectable life, which turns out to be full of small legal harbours where two people may be near each other with everyone watching and nobody minding. The first and greatest of these is church. Do not let the future smirk at this, because the future will meet its sweethearts at work, and in machines it carries in its pockets, and it has no business smirking at anybody. Church is the one place the entire town assembles, weekly, in its best clothes, seated in known positions, and a young man who wishes to be seen by a particular family may be seen there, reliably, 52 times a year. He can time his arrival to pass a particular pew. He can sing, if he has the voice for it, in a manner calculated to carry approximately 4 rows forward. He can be beautifully, conspicuously attentive to the sermon in the sight line of a girl who is being beautifully, conspicuously attentive to the same sermon, and the two of them can conduct what is, for all purposes, an entire conversation consisting of nothing but attendance. And afterwards comes the churchyard, the 10 minutes of milling and bowing on the path, the one weekly interval in which the whole parish is licensed to greet itself, and families fall into step, and it is the most natural thing in the world for the Blake Senior and the doctor's family to find themselves walking as far as the marketplace together, sons and daughters included, in public, after divine service, unimpeachable. Half the marriages in England, Violet, were built in churchyards, 10 Sunday minutes at a time, and the vicars knew it perfectly well, and the wise ones took a quiet professional pride in the traffic. Then there are the evenings your town organizes for itself, and 1872 is a great age for organized evenings. The concert at the town hall, the penny readings where the curate does the comic voices, the lecture on the Arctic with the magic lantern, and the private musical parties of which Mrs. Hartwell's, tomorrow, is the local Supreme Court. These occasions all share one architecture: rows of chairs, an interval, and refreshments. And it is the interval that matters, 20 minutes of lemonade in which the seating dissolves, and a man may bring a lady a glass and stand beside her while she drinks it, in a crowded room, chaperones at 40% attention, and say something that is almost, nearly, not quite about the music. Learn to hear these conversations for what they are, Violet, because you are about to spend a year and a half inside them. When Mr. Blake observes that the soprano took the last song rather too fast, and you reply that you thought the accompanist was chasing her, and he laughs before he can arrange not to, that is not small talk. That is two people discovering, in the only channel open to them, that they find the same things funny, which your grandmother could have told you is somewhere near the whole of the matter. Courtship under supervision becomes a connoisseurship of tiny things. How he treats the servant who brings the tray, whether his jokes have unkindness in them, whether he listens to the end of your sentences or merely waits at the end of his own, and the ages system, for all its starch, is quietly brilliant at exposing exactly these. A man can perform for 15 minutes. Nobody can perform for 18 months. But the crown of it all, the great licensed paradise of mid-Victorian courtship, arrives with the warm weather, and it is, of all things on earth, croquet. In the 1860s, a game of hoops and mallets came out of nowhere and conquered every lawn in England. And it did not conquer them because the English were starved for sport. It conquered them because croquet is the first game in anyone's memory that ladies and gentlemen play together, on the same ground, at the same time, in ordinary afternoon clothes, and because it is played slowly, on grass, in summer, with long pauses in which absolutely nothing prevents conversation. The chaperones approved of it on sight. An open lawn, in full view of the terrace, where every player can be seen from the tea table at all times. What could possibly be safer? The players approved of it for precisely the same reason seen from below, because full view is not the same thing as full earshot. Two figures at the far hoop, heads bent gravely over the lie of the balls, are visibly, certifiably playing croquet. And what they are saying while they play, it carries no further than the roses. A gentleman may position a lady's hands upon the mallet, briefly, instructively, in a manner that would empty the room if it happened at a piano. The game requires partners, and partnerships require negotiation, and there is a shot in the rules. Violet, in the actual printed rules, where one player places a foot upon their own ball and strikes it so as to send an opponent's ball away across the lawn, and the choosing of whose ball to send away, and how far, and with what expression, conducts more courtship in an afternoon than the assembly rooms manage in a season. Punch has been joking for years that croquet is not a game at all, but a matrimonial agency with hoops, and Punch, for once, is simply reporting. And when the party moves to archery, as at the grander garden parties it does, the joke deepens. Because archery requires a lady to stand beautifully, draw a bow, and hold the whole attitude while everybody watches, and the sporting papers observed long ago, in print, that the attitude was extremely becoming, and the mammas of England replied, in effect, we know. Nobody in this scene is fooled, Violet. Not the players, not the chaperones, not the aunts at the tea table keeping score of two entirely different games at once. The lawn is a marriage market that has agreed to call itself a pastime, and everyone plays along, because the alternative, everybody knows, is the parlour, and the parlour has no far hoop, and in August, when the sun has flattened the lawns and papa can leave the practice to his assistant for a fortnight, the whole apparatus packs its trunks and goes to the sea, because the seaside holiday, that great Victorian invention, is among many other things an annex of the marriage market, and everybody who has ever taken lodgings at one knows it. The esplanade at Weymouth in August is your churchyard path, grown 300 yards long and walked 4 times daily. The band plays, the parasols revolve, the same families pass one another at the same hours, until nodding becomes bowing, becomes stopping, and the pier at evening, all lamps and sea air and permissible crowding, does more introducing in a fortnight than the town hall manages in a winter. The bathing itself, you will be relieved or disappointed to hear, plays no part in the romance whatever. The machines rolling ladies and gentlemen into the water at opposite ends of the beach, each sex boiled separately, as it were, so that courtship at the seaside is conducted entirely in dry clothes at sea level. But something in the salt air does loosen the web, and the manuals know it and issue their sternest small print on exactly this point. The watering place acquaintance. Families thrown together in lodgings strike up in a week intimacies that would take a year at home. Young men appear on esplanades trailing no vouchers but their own waistcoats, agreeable, unplaceable, unverifiable, and many a mamma has discovered in September that her daughter's delightful new correspondent is known to absolutely nobody she knows. So the rule runs: a seaside friendship lapses at the railway station unless it can afterwards be ratified through proper channels. Introductions re-performed at home by people who can vouch, the web reasserting itself the moment the tide is out of earshot. Your own August passes without incident. If you call it without incident that the Blakes of Wantage take their fortnight at Weymouth the same fortnight, an alignment of calendars at which nobody in either family expresses the smallest surprise, and Mr. Blake lifts his hat on the esplanade at 11 each morning with the regularity of a coastal light, and Kate keeps a tally in the back of her diary, which she believes to be secret and is not, which brings us to the supervision itself, because we have been saying chaperone all evening as though she were a fixture, like a fender, and she deserves better. The rule: first, in its plain form, an unmarried lady of your class is not alone with an unmarried gentleman, not in a room, not in a lane, not in a carriage, and every arrangement of your day is built around that single sentence. If Mr. Blake calls, Mama or Louisa is present. If you walk into town while he happens, and he will develop an astonishing gift for happening, to be walking the same way, then Kate is with you, 2 paces back, and Kate in this office has a name the whole century uses and no manual will admit to. She is the gooseberry. And playing gooseberry is the universally acknowledged fate of younger sisters everywhere, trailing a courting couple at a fixed distance, studying hedgerows with enormous interest, close enough for propriety and far enough for mercy. But here is what the future always gets wrong about the chaperone, Violet, because the future will remember her as a jailer, and she is not a jailer. She is a valve. Watch your mama operate over the coming months, and you will see the machine's true genius, which is that supervision has settings, and the settings are the message. Early days. The full parlor. Needlework at close range, conversation general. But as the committee's confidence in a young man grows, the valve opens. By degrees so fine no instrument could register them. Mama discovers, mid-call, that she must speak to the cook, and is gone 4 minutes, leaving the door open and Louisa in the room, and 4 minutes of near privacy have been formally issued, like a ration. On the walk back from church, the elder's pace slackens by half a step, and the gap between the generations widens to 8 feet, which at churchyard volume is a private room. At the picnic by the river in July, you will be permitted to walk with him along the towpath as far as the lock, in sight the whole way. Kate detained by an urgent matter concerning cake, and none of it is accident. A courtship's progress in your world is measured precisely in the length of the leash, and everybody concerned can read the measurement at a glance, including, most importantly, Mr. Blake, who understands that 4 unchaperoned minutes by the roses were not carelessness. They were a communiqué from the committee, and the communiqué said, "Proceed," and under the choreography, all this time, run the rules of address, which the future will find perhaps the strangest of everything tonight. This man is falling in love with you, and you, though you are being careful with yourself, are some measurable way toward falling in love with him. And through all of it, month upon month, he is Mr. Blake, and you are Miss Everett, and neither of you has any other option. Christian names are not a pleasantry in your world. They are a license, and the license has grades. Family, then intimate friends of years' standing, and then, at the very end of a long road, a betrothed. For him to call you Violet now would be a familiarity roughly equivalent, in the future's currency, to reading your letters over your shoulder, and for you to call him Arthur, even to Kate, even in your own head where nobody can hear, feels, you notice with interest, like handling something warm from the oven. So the names themselves become part of the courtship. There will come an evening, months from now, when he says Miss Everett and the pause before it says something else entirely. And every couple in England knows that pause and the first use of a Christian name, when it finally, lawfully comes, lands with a force the future will spend 3 technologies trying to recover. And while we are at it, one more piece of vocabulary, so that you do not fall out of your chair when you hear it at the musical party. When Aunt Louisa observes of the curate and Miss Emily Ford that he has been making love to her these 4 years, she means talking, Violet. Making love, in your century, means courting speech, compliments, attentions, the verbal end of romance and nothing else whatsoever, and the future is going to giggle at that sentence in every Victorian novel it reads. And your century, could it giggle back, would point out that it at least had a phrase for the thing, a whole art it practiced on sofas at arm's length, and ask the future, kindly, what happened to its conversation. Now, for the rule that bites, the one the whole edifice depends on, and the one you will be most tempted to break, paper. An unmarried lady does not correspond with an unmarried gentleman. Not letters, not notes, not a line tucked into a returned book, nothing written, nothing signed. And the reason is not prudishness. The reason is that in your world, a letter is not a message. It is an object, an article of evidence, permanent, portable, ownable, losable, and utterly unlike a glance in that it can be produced later in front of people at the worst imaginable moment. A love letter in a man's desk is a hostage. If he is honourable, it is merely a risk. If he is not, it is a lever, and the age is full of quiet stories, the kind told at the twilight end of sewing circles, of families paying to recover a daughter's handwriting because 2 sheets of girlish hyperbole, written at 19 to a man who turned out badly, could stand between a woman and any respectable marriage for the rest of her life. So the rule is absolute, and therefore, this being humanity, the dodges are magnificent. The lending of books with passages very faintly penciled. The concert program returned, with one corner turned down at a particular song. Messages routed through married sisters, who may correspond with anybody, and who edit with the solemnity of ambassadors. And the servants, Violet, the servants, because a shilling and a pleading look have carried more love letters than the Royal Mail, and every housemaid in England has at some point stood at a kitchen door weighing a folded paper in her hand, knowing that she carries 2 reputations and her own situation with it. Your mama, who was young once, which you doubt at your peril, will say only this on the subject. And she will say it without looking up from her needlework. A lady writes nothing before her engagement that she would blush to hear read aloud in a courtroom. You will think, tonight, that the courtroom is a figure of speech. Hold that thought for later, because it is not. And the last chapter of tonight's story turns on exactly this, on love's paperwork produced in public, to a jury, at so much a sheet, and since we are below stairs with that housemaid and her folded paper, stay there a moment, because 2 floors under your own courtship there is another one running, and the comparison is the sharpest thing tonight has to show you. Hannah is your housemaid, 19, quick, kind, up at 6, and she is walking out, as the phrase goes, with Joseph, the carrier's son, a large, gentle young man who can lift a flour barrel and blushes at hymn tunes. And Hannah's courtship is governed not by etiquette, Violet, but by the terms of her employment, because when she took her place your mamma, like every mistress in England, stated the standing rule of domestic service, and the rule is 2 words long, no followers. A follower is a sweetheart, and a housemaid is contracted not to have one, not at the door, not in the kitchen, not loitering in the lane with intent, and a maid discovered entertaining a follower can be dismissed for it, and dismissed without a character, which is the true terror. Since without a character, the written testimony of her honesty from her last mistress, she may not get another place at all. Understand what this means. The class of Englishwoman with the least to lose in property has courtship rules enforced not by embarrassment but by livelihood. Your rules are velvet. Hannah's a contract. What she gets, in exchange for 80 hours a week of other people's coal scuttles, is an evening out here and there, and every other Sunday afternoon, if her mistress is kind. And your mamma, to her lasting credit, is kind, and so, on alternate Sundays, Hannah puts on a hat trimmed by her own hands and walks the Ock Valley footpaths with Joseph. Openly, both of them scrubbed and shy and slow, because walking is the whole of what they may do and the whole of what they can afford, and somewhere on those paths, between one stile and the next, the same enormous questions get asked and answered as on any croquet lawn in the county. And here is the thing to fall asleep on, Violet. Her courtship and yours are the same animal in different coats. Both are conducted in public. Both are policed by watchers. Hers by the whole village and the mistress's rule. Yours by the parlour and the aunt. Both are paced by money. His wages, your settlement, and both run on stolen intervals of half privacy, the towpath, the far hoop, the churchyard path. The age likes to believe its classes live on different planets. In this one department at least, everybody is walking the same lane, 2 paces apart, watched. Widen the lens once more, briefly, before we come back to your parlour, because above your world as well as below it the same machine runs at other pressures. Up in London, in the world of the 10,000, The season compresses everything you are doing this year into 12 furious weeks, hundreds of families surging through the same 50 ballrooms, and up there the arithmetic is naked in a way your town would blush at. Incomes printed in the sporting papers. Heiresses tracked through drawing rooms like comets. Younger sons with beautiful manners, and 400 a year hunting fortunes with the open diligence of men at a profession, mammas with lists, actual lists, and the whole campaign audited nightly along the chaperone's wall. It is your courtship, Violet. Played at altitude, faster, colder, with more money on the table and less time on the clock. And it produces, every summer, its crop of matches, some of them even happy. You are not missing anything essential, is the point. The season is only the parish churchyard wearing diamonds, and the towpath at the lock, allowing for scale, is doing everything Mayfair does, at a fraction of the cost, with better air. But there is one more marriage market in England, and it is the strangest of the lot. And it is time to pay the debt from the top of the night. It is sold at the railway bookstall. It costs a few pence. It comes out weekly. And it is called, with the magnificent plainness of your century, the Matrimonial News, a newspaper founded 2 years ago, in 1870, for one purpose only: advertisements for husbands and wives, page upon page of them, each a few lines long, each numbered like a lot at auction, replies to be sent under cover to the office, forwarded unopened, gentleman of 32, dark, of good address, in receipt of £200 per annum, wishes to correspond with a young lady of domesticated habits, some means preferred, view matrimony. Young widow, considered pleasing, small independence, no encumbrance, would meet respectable gentlemen in the corn trade or similar. A young lady of 26, tall, musical, affectionate disposition, having no opportunity of forming suitable acquaintance, wishes. And there, in that last phrase, having no opportunity, is the entire sad, practical human truth of the thing. Because who reads such a paper? Violet. The town laughs at it. Your papa has pronounced it vulgar at breakfast. And its readers are exactly the people your beautifully organized system fails. The curate in a parish of 40 souls and no gentry, the engineer posted where no introductions reach, the farmer 12 miles from the nearest assembly, widowers with young children and no time, governesses, and the great unnumbered regiment of respectable women in lodging houses, whose families have died or scattered, and to whom no hostess's murmur behind a fan is ever coming. Your machine runs on introductions, and an introduction requires a web of families to issue it. And outside the web there is nothing, no path, no channel, no lawful way for two lonely, respectable people 40 miles apart to ever learn of one another's existence. So the age, being an age of engineers, built one, and then was ashamed of it, and read it behind closed doors, and wrote to box numbers by candlelight. And some of those letters, because swindlers found the paper on day one, ended in tears and lost savings, and were read aloud in court to laughter. But some of them, Violet, and the record is quite clear on this, some of them ended at altars, in small churches, between two people nobody had ever introduced, who had found each other through 6 lines of newsprint and 18 months of correspondence, and who generally omitted in later years to tell their children precisely how they had met. The future will build this same machine again, page for page, question for question, down to the coy photographs and the swindlers, and will carry it in its pocket, and will feel very modern about it, and it will be wrong. The lonely hearts of England were advertising in 1870, 3 lines at a time. View matrimony, and the only difference worth recording is that they had the decency to be embarrassed. Back in Abingdon, the summer goes over into September. The calls resume their stately, fortnightly rhythm, and it is time to talk about the subject underneath every subject, the one the roses and the freesias are all standing on top of, which is money, because here is a truth the novels will not tell you straight. In your England, a man does not marry when he falls in love. He marries when he can afford to, and the distance between those two dates is one of the great unphotographed landscapes of the 19th century. The periodicals your papa reads have been running the argument for years under one title or another, and the famous number, the number every young professional man in England carries about with him like a stone in the boot, is £300 a year. On 300 a year, the essayists say, a couple may marry prudently. A small house, a maid of all work, joints of beef, respectability with the seams showing only slightly. Below it, a gentleman's marriage descends into what the age calls, with a shudder, love in a cottage, charming in poetry and fatal in practice. Because gentility is not a feeling, Violet, it is an establishment. It is at least one servant, since the wife of a professional man cannot black her own grates without the whole town adjusting her family's position by inches. It is the correct pew, the correct coat, the doctor's bills, and the endless small subscriptions to respectability that never appear in the love songs. Mr. Blake, Aunt Louisa's soundings have established, has £280 this year, rising perhaps to £340 when old Mr. Harding reduces his share of the practice, which he is expected to do within the 12-month. And that sentence, that dry little sentence about an old solicitor's retirement, is why courtships in your world move at the pace they move, why the kettle is kept on the smallest flame, why a man may adore a girl in April and not speak until the following May. He is not being coy. He is waiting for the number. Because to speak before he can support her is not romantic. It is a kind of theft, an appropriation of her best years against goods he cannot deliver, and every conduct book in England says so in nearly those words. The future will call this materialism. Your century calls it honour. And for once, Violet, the quarrel between them is closer than either side thinks, because both of them are trying to protect the same person. And she is currently in the parlour, pretending to read. And in October, the theory walks up the front path and rings the bell, because your papa receives, this month, a communication he was not expecting, made in correct form, man to man, at the surgery, an offer for you, and it is not from Mr. Blake. Mr. Crane is a brewer, a substantial one, a widower of 46, with a fine square house on the Oxford Road, 2 motherless children, and upwards of 800 a year, and there is nothing in his suit to laugh at, Violet. So do not laugh at it. He has observed you for a year across church and market. He states his circumstances like a man laying accounts before auditors. He proposes marriage, establishment, kindness, and comfort, and he does it all through your father first, so that you need never hear of it should the family think it unsuitable, which is, by every rule in the book, exactly how the thing ought to be done. And here the machine performs one of its most delicate obligations, because an offer once made must be laid before the daughter, fairly, whole, without thumb on the scale. Your parents may advise, may urge, may sigh, but the concealment of an honourable offer is a wrong the age itself condemns. And so there is a family conference by lamplight, and you sit at the centre of it holding your own future in your hands, like a bowl you must not drop, and listen to your mama do her duty, which is arithmetic, established now, not in some hopeful 12-month. A house with carpets on every floor, security against any weather, a good man, Violet, for he is a good man, everyone says so, and his children motherless and small, and your century sees nothing whatever strange in the gap of years. It's men marrying at 2 seasons of life, the young man rising and the widower refitting, and half the comfortable matrons of the town made exactly this bargain, and will tell you, some of them truthfully, that love came along afterwards, like the furniture. It is Aunt Louisa, of all people, who speaks the sentence that settles the room without lifting her eyes from her needle. Let the girl refuse whom she cannot love, sister. She has the right, and it is the only one she has got, so let her use it, and you use it. The refusal travels back the way the offer came, through Papa, couched with every courtesy, pleading, as the manuals prescribe, no reason beyond the want of that affection without which marriage is a mockery, and Mr. Crane receives it like the gentleman he actually is. And within the year has married a sensible widow from Faringdon, who by every account is fond of him and a mother to his children, so this is not a story with a villain in it. It is something more instructive. It is the shape of the choice your whole system really turns on. The bird in the hand against the bird in Bath Street, security on the table against a junior partnership and an old man's unscheduled retirement, and understand clearly what you did by lamplight that night. Because the age will not let you romanticize it. The veto is real. It is yours. It is absolute. And it is not free. You have declined a certainty and kept a hope, and hope, Aunt Louisa could tell you, does not always pay out. And knowing that, she armed you anyway. And the last mercy of the whole affair is one the machine performs in silence. A refused offer is a secret, kept both ways. Her honor holding his name and his dignity holding hers, so the town never hears one word of it. And when Mr. Crane bows to your mamma in the marketplace the following week, nothing whatever has happened, and both of them mean it kindly, and that, Violet, that ordinary Tuesday bow over the apple stalls, is the code doing the one thing it does better than any system before or since, which is letting people keep their faces while their hearts heal in private. November then takes Mr. Blake away altogether, because the firm has a great matter at Bristol. An estate in dissolution wanting 6 weeks of a careful man on the spot. And old Mr. Harding is past travelling, and so the junior partner goes, and your courtship enters the strangest of all its seasons, which is silence. Not estrangement, nothing so dramatic. Simply distance. In an age when distance still means what it says, because you may not write to him, he may not write to you, the ban standing as absolute at 100 miles, as across a parlour, and so for 6 weeks, this man who has organised your Tuesdays for a year and a half becomes what everyone becomes in your century when the coach has gone, news. You learn of him sideways, at one remove, the way sailors' wives read weather. Papa mentions at dinner that the Bristol matter prospers. Mr. Harding, met outside the bank, is heard to say, "The boy is doing uncommonly well." Once a fortnight, the senior partner receives a letter of which 2 sentences are, with elaborate carelessness, repeated where you can hear them. And the age, which has arranged everything else on purpose, has arranged this too. Because absence, in the machine's cold and rather magnificent reasoning, is evidence. What survives 6 silent weeks is character. And what does not was appetite, and a courtship that cannot idle was never going to run the length of a marriage. What you discover in those 6 weeks you will keep to yourself. But the record may note its outline, that there is a difference, and a girl finds it out exactly here, between missing a person and missing the attention, the second being hunger and the first being love, and that the house feels 1 chair short at evening. And that when he calls again in the 2nd week of December, 2 days home, correct to the hour, and you hear his voice in the hall asking your mamma whether the roads have been bad, something in you that has been standing at attention since October, quietly, finally, stands down. And if you want to see what happens when the number never quite arrives, you have only to look at your dearest friend. Because Emily Ford has been engaged for 4 years, and is beginning, this autumn, to wear it. Her curate, Mr. Pryor, is everything the heart could ask and the ledger could not. Devoted, gentle, learned, and in receipt of £90 a year for the cure of souls, in a parish that works him like a mill horse. They cannot marry on £90. Everyone agrees, including them, so they wait, as half professional England waits, for a living, a benefice, an incumbency with a house, and 200 a year attached, which must be given him by someone who has one to give, and so their entire married life sits in the gift of patrons who have never met Emily and never will. This is the long engagement, Violet, and your age is full of them, curates and subalterns and junior clerks and their girls. Couples engaged at 22 who marry at 30, whole loves conducted across 7 years of fortnightly letters, and it is at once the most honourable and the most quietly expensive arrangement your century runs, because the cost of it is paid almost entirely by the woman, in the one currency she cannot re-earn, which is time. A man of 34 is a man in his prime. A woman of 31, in the market's brutal ledger, has depreciated through no act of her own, while keeping faith. Emily knows this arithmetic. Her mother recites it, in fragments, at intervals, the way the sea works on a cliff, and Emily, who has a spine under the dimples, keeps her 4-year-old promise, and answers her mother with the one sentence against which the whole market has never found a reply. I would rather wait for him than settle for anyone. Hold Emily in your mind tonight, because the age will show you 100 pictures of courtship as a dance. It is also, in every third house on your street, a feat of endurance, performed by patient people in their best clothes, and the dance and the endurance are the same word. The cold weather, when it comes, brings its own liturgy, because winter, which looks like the death of courting season, is secretly its accomplice. The river meadows flood and freeze, as they do most years, and all Abingdon goes skating, and skating, Violet, is croquet on knives, a sanctioned mixed assembly in full public view, at which falling over is not only permitted, but structurally guaranteed. And a gentleman may take a lady's hands, both of them, actually in his, to steady her, to teach her for whole minutes together on the open ice, before hundreds of witnesses, every one of whom did the same thing in their own December. Mr. Blake, it emerges, skates beautifully, which annoys you in a way you file away for later examination, and by the third afternoon you have progressed from his arm to the crossed hands hold, gliding up the long flooded meadow with the town black and cheerful all around you, entirely proper, entirely public, his gloves and yours interlocked, and if you can hear his heart going like a watch through 2 coats and 4 gloves, that is between you and the ice. And then Christmas. And Christmas brings the one piece of licensed madness in the entire calendar, the sprig of mistletoe in the hall, under which, by a custom older than anybody's grandmother, a kiss may be claimed without disgrace, 1 berry to be plucked from the sprig for each kiss taken, the license expiring when the berries do, and the young men of every parish in England spend Advent in strategic study of doorways. In the event, at the Hartwells' Christmas party, Mr. Blake does not manoeuvre you under the mistletoe, though you pass within a yard of it 4 times, and you understand, walking home with your breath white in the lamplight, that this too was a message, that a man 4 months from speaking does not spend his capital on a berry, and that you have somehow reached the point where the kiss he did not take says more than the kisses other men have taken, and if that sentence makes no sense to you, listener, then you have never been 21 in December. February brings the post office's strangest week of the year, because your century, the century of the chaperone and the unwritten letter, has decided that for 1 day annually, the entire apparatus stands down, and that day is the 14th, St. Valentine's, when the mails of England swell by more than 1 million envelopes and the postmen stagger under sacks of lace paper, embossed hearts, satin pincushions and verses of a sweetness that would be actionable in any other month. A Valentine is anonymous by convention, and the anonymity is the entire machinery. It is the one document a young man may send a young lady before engagement without her mamma returning it, precisely because he officially did not send it, and half the pleasure of the week is the national guessing game conducted over 10,000 breakfast tables, and the other half is watching who blushes. Yours, when it comes, is a fine one, real lace paper, a spray of pressed forget-me-nots, and 4 lines of verse in a hand that has been carefully, almost successfully disguised, and is the hand, you would know it anywhere, that signs the letters your papa receives from the firm in Bath Street. Kate is beside herself. Aunt Louisa examines the postmark like a detective inspector. Your mama says only, "What a very respectable Valentine," which in her language is a benediction. But because this is your century, Violet, the same post that carries the lace also carries the poison. And we owe the record this. Beside the sentimental Valentine trade runs its shadow, the insult Valentine, printed by the same houses on cheaper paper, a caricature and a jeering verse, sent anonymously to mock a girl's vanity, a spinster's age, a shopman's airs, a rival's suit, and thousands upon thousands of these go through the mails every February. And in your parents' day, before the penny stamp, postage was paid by the receiver, so that the victim of such a thing paid twopence for her own humiliation. The future will believe it invented anonymous cruelty by machine. It invented nothing, Violet. It only removed the twopence. And it is worth knowing, as you pin the forget-me-nots into your workbox where certain things are beginning to accumulate, that last year, being a leap year, licensed by ancient joke, the reverse proposal, the 29th of February on which a lady may ask a gentleman, and the comic papers wrung it dry as they do every 4th year, and Aunt Louisa observed at the time, to nobody in particular, that any custom which comes round less often than the Olympic Games and is spent entirely on jokes may be presumed to be doing no heavy lifting. Spring then, the second spring of this story, and everything quickens, because there arrives in every long courtship a season when the thing becomes, in the town's wonderful phrase, an understood thing, and no one can tell you the day it happened. No word has been spoken, nothing is settled, and yet the whole parish has quietly refiled you. Mrs. Hartwell seats you and Mr. Blake together without appearing to decide it. The other young men of the neighbourhood have withdrawn their attentions with the ceremonial tact of diplomats leaving a conference, and even the draper's assistant has begun showing your mama a certain class of linen unprompted. An understanding is the age's masterpiece of collective tact, a courtship that everybody acknowledges and nobody mentions, a betrothal held in escrow, and it exists because the machine needs a final inspection interval, a last stretch of road on which either party may still, without disgrace, without breach, without lawyers, quietly withdraw. The understood couple are watched with a new benevolence and a new sharpness both at once, because this is the last exit, and the town, which has been invigilating this examination for the better part of a year, would like it understood that it expects a result. And so, on a bright Tuesday at the end of April, 1873, Mr. Arthur Blake calls at your father's surgery hour, without an appointment and without a symptom, and is closeted with your papa for 40 minutes, and we should be honest with the future about what this meeting is and is not, because the future has it upside down. He is not asking your father for you, as though you were the pony. The sequence, in your class, at your date, runs the other way. A man of honour ascertains the father's consent to pay his addresses, that is, permission to ask, so that no daughter is ever exposed to an offer her family would forbid, with all the pain that would entail, and so that no man lays his heart open without knowing the ground will bear. What happens in that room is therefore not a purchase but an audit, and it is conducted, both parties standing nearly the whole time, in the dialect Englishmen use when the matter is too large for feelings, which is to say, entirely in facts. His income, present and settled, the prospects of the partnership, his expectations under his late uncle's will, the state of his life insurance, for your century, Violet, has invented the actuarial proposal, and a prudent suitor arrives insured, so that even his death is provided against. Your papa, for his part, discloses what will come with you, the sum settled on you under your grandfather's will, and what he means to add, and the two of them, the doctor and the solicitor, work through it item by item, gravely, thoroughly, two honest men determining whether two young people can be kept safe on the proceeds, which is, when you strip the varnish off, The only question either of them has, after love has done its best and its worst, will she be provided for? It is the least romantic scene in tonight's entire story. And I will tell you a secret about it. One the age knows and never says. Your papa has been dreading it for a year, not the arithmetic, but the meaning of the arithmetic, and when it is over, and the two men shake hands, he stands a while at the surgery window with his back to the room, doing sums of a kind that have no numbers in them at all. What follows fast, as these things do once the dam is out. Thursday is the Fords' garden party, the first warm afternoon of the year, and by an accident so elaborately constructed that 3 separate ladies contributed load-bearing lies to it, you find yourself walking the lower path by the river with Mr. Blake, the party fully audible and completely invisible beyond the laurels. 4 minutes of issued privacy stretching, by the clemency of the committee, toward 10. And here, I will do something the cameras of the future never learned to do, Violet, and step back, because what he says under the laurels belongs to you. The shape of it, though, the shape belongs to the record, so know this. He does not kneel. Kneeling being for novels and for men with drier lawns, he speaks quietly and not briefly, having rehearsed, by his own later confession, for 3 weeks in the walk between his lodgings and the office. And at the end of speaking, he asks. And the asking is real, because here at the very last gate, the whole machine finally stops and hands the matter to you. Every committee, every card, every audited pound of it comes down to a question that only you may answer, and that nobody, not your papa, not your mama, not the assembled weight of the entire 19th century, can answer for you. The lady's veto is absolute, Violet. It is the one absolute possession the age allows you. And girls up and down England use it. Refuse good matches. Sensible matches. Matches their mothers wept over. And the manuals themselves, whatever the mothers say, back the girls. A refusal must be given gently, promptly, and plainly. It requires no reason beyond the want of that affection without which marriage is a mockery, and a gentleman refused is to accept his answer, like a gentleman, once, finally, and go. There are even, because your century leaves nothing unprovided, printed models for the purpose. The letter-writing manuals on the bookseller's back shelf offering specimen proposals and specimen refusals form letters for the heart to a gentleman on declining his offer without wounding his esteem. And thousands of real proposals, Violet, especially the shy ones, especially the second attempts, really did travel by post, composed with the manual open on the desk like a man doing his taxes, and were answered the same way. And if you find that absurd and rather touching in equal measure, then you have understood your century better than most of its critics. As for you, under the laurels, with the river going by, you had your answer ready before the first freesias died, but you make him wait out 1 full breath before you give it. 1. For the 11 Tuesdays he called and talked to your mother about roads. For the 3rd dance he never asked for. For the berry he did not spend, and then you say yes. And somewhere beyond the laurels, at a distance carefully judged to hear nothing and miss nothing, your mamma and Mrs. Ford abruptly resume a conversation about delphiniums that neither of them has any memory of beginning. You walk back up the lawn engaged. And the world, which was watching before, now watches with the lid off. Because an engagement in your town is not announced so much as detonated. There is no notice in the Times for people of your altitude, no cards printed, that would be showy. Instead, the news travels the only proper way. By your mama, in person. In strict order of precedence, a round of calls over 3 days that follows the map of family closeness as exactly as a coronation procession, and woe betide the intimate friend who hears it from an acquaintance. And as the congratulations come back up the same channels, listen closely, Violet, because you will hear the age perform one of its most exquisite little rituals of face. Callers congratulate Mr. Blake, warmly, roundly, on his great good fortune, and to you those same callers offer their best wishes, their hopes for your happiness, and never, ever, the word congratulations, and the books are explicit about the distinction, though they grow shy about the reason, so I will supply it. To congratulate a lady is to imply she has won something, achieved something, brought something off, and no lady, in the official cosmology of your century, was ever trying to get married at all. It simply befell her, like weather, while she was thinking of other things. He hunted, she was found. And everybody in every parlour in England knows precisely how much of that is fiction. Your mama has been directing this campaign like a quartermaster general for 2 years, and still the form holds, because the form is the tribute vice pays to the dignity of daughters. And your century would rather die than say aloud what everyone spent this whole story doing. So the gentlemen are congratulated, and the ladies are wished joy. And the aunts, in the privacy of the back parlour, tally the thing up in plain figures, like the honest brokers they are. Now watch how the world rearranges itself around the ring, because betrothal, in your England, is a formal estate. A legal and social condition between maiden and wife with its own costume, privileges and police. The ring first. A betrothal ring on the third finger of the left hand. And Mr. Blake, being the kind of man he is, has chosen not diamonds, which would in any case be above his station this year, but a band set with 6 small stones, ruby, emerald, garnet, amethyst, ruby again, diamond, and Kate, who is quicker than any of us, has the initials out loud before the box is fully open. The stones spell regard, a jeweller's alphabet your age delights in, love spelled out in mineral, a message ring. And you may now wear openly on your hand what could not, 15 months ago, even be written on paper. Because that is the great unlocking, Violet. You may write to each other now. The correspondence ban lifts on the day of consent. And the first letter that arrives addressed to you in that known hand, openly, by the morning post, with your mama passing it across the table without comment, is a small revolution in an envelope. You are Violet and Arthur to each other at last, in speech and on paper, a familiarity so long deferred that for the first fortnight each use of it feels slightly scandalous, like wearing another person's coat. He may walk with you now, arm in arm, openly. Kate stood down from gooseberry duty with mixed feelings on her part. He may escort you to church, sit beside you at concerts, call twice a week and stay past the quarter hour, and the two of you may even be left alone in the parlour together. Briefly, door open, household within earshot, an allowance unthinkable a season ago. But do not mistake the license for liberty, because an engaged couple is chaperoned still, merely on the longer lead. No travelling together unaccompanied, no closed carriages, no visits to his lodgings under any imaginable circumstance, and at every dance from now until October, you will dance with him first and most. But not only, propriety requiring even the betrothed to circulate. The age has moved you from one glass case to a larger one, and it keeps a particular eye on precisely this interval, because everybody knows, and nobody says, that an engagement is the most dangerous room in the whole house of courtship. Intimacy has been licensed, finality has not, and the couple who forget the difference, should the engagement afterwards fail, discover that the account of those liberties is presented entirely to her. One examination remains, and it is the one no manual can coach you through, because in marrying Arthur, you are joining a family, and the family would like a look at you. In June comes the visit to his people, a custom with the force of law. The bride-elect travels to Wantage, Mama accompanying the first day, and then, mark this, stays 3 days under his parents' roof, chaperoned now by the very family she is entering, which is the point of the exercise, and there is not a woman alive who was ever perfectly calm about it. His father, the vicar, you have met, and he is easy country, all garden and Greek and second helpings. His mother is the examination. Mrs. Blake Sr. receives you with complete kindness and total attention, and over 3 days, without one question that could be called a question. she takes your measure entirely. How you pour, how you speak to the servant, whether your stitches are your own, what you find funny, how you wear the third day of a visit when the first freshness is off everybody. And you understand, somewhere in the second afternoon, that you are watching the far end of the road you are on, a woman who kept this house on a clergyman's stipend through 30 years and 2 curacies, and that her scrutiny is not hostility, it is handover. She is finding out what she is giving her son to, exactly as your mama found out what she was giving you to. The mothers of England running their quiet double audit under all that lace, and on the last morning, at the gate, she puts into your hands a small parcel, which you open on the train because you cannot wait, and it is lace, a length of her own mother's Honiton, for the wedding veil, and your mama, when she sees it, goes quite still because she can price what has just happened to the last farthing. You have been passed, Violet. And the notice of it is textile, the only language, as usual, in which this century says the things it means most. And while the two of you are learning to write letters that the postman may carry, the father's work resumes, because a middle-class marriage is executed twice, once in a church and once on paper, and the paper comes first. Within the fortnight, your papa's solicitor, and there is no way to soften this, and the age would not want it softened. The firm of which your own betrothed is junior partner, senior partner, acting, propriety observed, open the negotiation of the marriage settlement, the great private treaty of your life. Here is what it is, plainly, because the future will need it explained. Under the common law of England, on her wedding day, a wife's personal property passes into her husband's hands. Her earnings are his, her purse is his, and the Reformed Act of 1870 has so far pushed back only the edges of this. The settlement is the workaround the propertied classes built through the courts of equity. A trust, executed before the wedding, by which money is placed with trustees, typically her father and brother or uncle, to be held for her separate use, beyond her husband's reach and beyond. This is the point your papa cares about. The reach of her husband's creditors. Should the practice fail, should he die, should anything in this uncertain world go wrong, out of it she receives pin money, an allowance paid to her own hand for her own purse, and out of it, if she is widowed, comes her jointure, the income that keeps her from her children's charity, and in its clauses are settled the portions of daughters yet unborn. Understand what you are looking at, Violet. When the draft comes to the house and your papa reads it twice through his spectacles in a silence that is not anger. This document is the tenderness of fathers, translated into the only language the law will accept from them, 30 pages of whereas, and hereinafter that all decode to the same 4 words, she must be safe. The poor marry without one, and the law takes them as it finds them. And that is a colder story told on another night. You will sign on a Thursday, at the office in Bath Street, your hand shaking slightly, above the signatures of 4 men who have spent 6 weeks negotiating. In your name, with the man you love, and Arthur will sign it too, cheerfully, having drafted 2 of its clauses against himself, which, if you want it, is as good a portrait of your century's whole idea of love as tonight is going to produce. The last of summer goes to the trousseau, and the house fills with linen, because a bride does not simply get married in your England, she is provisioned, fitted out like a ship for a voyage estimated to last the rest of her life. The trousseau is her outfit of clothing and household linen, bought by her family, sized to their pride, dozens of chemises and nightgowns and petticoats, stockings by the dozen pair, the wedding clothes themselves, and then the linen, sheets and pillow slips and tablecloths and napkins in stacks, every piece of it to be marked. And marking means embroidery, her initials worked in tiny cross-stitch or satin stitch in the corner of every article she will take into her new life, And here is the small detail that catches every bride the same way. The initials are her new ones, letters that do not exist yet. A monogram for a woman who has not been invented, VB. Stitched 140 times by the fireside through August and September by you, your mama, Kate, under protest, and Aunt Louisa, whose corners are the finest of anybody's, and who says almost nothing these weeks, and works, and watches you across the lamplight with an expression you will only fully translate 20 years from now. Below stairs, Mind, the same institution runs on its own scale, has done for generations. Hannah has her bottom drawer, the working girl's trousseau, filled not in one triumphant season, but across whole years of service. A tablecloth. This Michaelmas, pillow slips the next. 6pence at a time out of wages. Against the day Joseph's carrying round is his own. By the last week of September, the boxes stand along your bedroom wall, corded, labelled, waiting, a girlhood packed and inventoried, and you sit on your bed the night the last one is fastened, 22 years old, in a room that has already begun, ever so slightly, to belong to somebody's past, and you understand at last why the language of your century calls what is coming, not a wedding, but an establishment. A wedding is a mourning, Violet. What is stacked against your wall is the rest of it. There was, of course, always the other road, and we should walk a little way down it before the bands are called, because your century knows it by heart and speaks of it in the voice reserved for thunderstorms, the road north. For more than 100 years, England made underage marriage, without consent, impossible at home, while Scotland asked nothing but a declaration before witnesses, and the arithmetic of that difference is a village called Gretna Green, the first settlement over the border on the Great Road, where generations of runaway couples were married in minutes by whoever stood handiest, most famously the blacksmith, over his anvil, a chaise smoking in the yard, and an enraged father half a stage behind on the same road. And your grandparents' generation dined out for decades on those races. Heiresses handed over ladders at midnight, postboys bribed to lame the pursuing horses, the anvil ringing at 3 a.m. By your own day, the fire is mostly out. A sober Act of Parliament now requires 3 weeks' residence in Scotland before the vows. And 3 weeks, Violet, is exactly the length of time romance of that particular temperature does not keep. But the true cost of an elopement was never the posting charges. And you know it from the hush in the voices. The couple came back, married and ruined, or at least she did. The man reabsorbed in a season or two. The girl cut, whispered over, received nowhere, her family in half mourning for a daughter still alive, because an elopement was not a wedding to your world. It was a verdict against every safeguard the machine exists to provide. Consent, settlement, witnesses, time, and a girl who bolted past them all had married a man on no evidence but his own account of himself, which is precisely the bet the whole system was built to spare her. Some of those marriages held anyway, love being no respecter of actuaries, and some ended exactly as the aunts predicted, and the age keeps both endings filed under the same lesson. You will not be needing the road north, but every courtship in England is conducted in the knowledge that it exists. A long grey ribbon over the hills with an anvil at the end of it. The machine's one unlocked door. Kept unlocked, perhaps because a cage with no door at all breeds a different kind of prisoner. And so, instead, you take the town's road, which begins with telling the church. And the church, with 15 centuries of practice at this, tells everybody else. Because the reading of the banns is the oldest broadcast in England. 3 Sundays running, in the parish church of each party, the vicar rises and publishes it. I publish the banns of marriage between Arthur Blake, bachelor, of this parish, and Violet Everett, spinster, of this parish. This is the first time of asking. If any of you know cause, or just impediment, why these persons should not be joined together, ye are to declare it. And on the first of those Sundays you will make a discovery every bride and groom in England has made before you. which is that there is no known way to sit while this is happening. The whole congregation, with the gentle shamelessness of a small town, has a look. Kate radiates sisterly importance beside you. Arthur, 2 pews back, studies the roof beams as though pricing them, and you fix your eyes on your prayer book and learn what it is to be, for 45 seconds, the most public 2 people in the parish. It costs almost nothing. The banns, which is the point of them. Marriage by announcement. Marriage in the open. 3 chances for the world to object. And the objection is real, Violet. That is no ornament. A forbidding of the banns stops everything on the spot, and though your church will get no drama, churches do, a prior wife remembered, a father unpaid, a girl underage snatched back, the machinery pausing mid-sentence while England's oldest safeguard does its work. Those with money and reasons may sidestep the whole performance and buy a license from the bishop's office, speed and privacy at a price, which is why a marriage by license carries everywhere a faint air of either grandeur or hurry, and above that again, for the very great, there is the special license from the Archbishop himself. Marry where you please, when you please. The aristocracy's key to its own locks, but your class takes the banns, takes the 3 Sundays and the looking, takes the grand old public slowness of it. And there is a rightness in that you already feel. This whole story has been conducted in front of the town, and the town has earned its 3 askings. The date is set for the last Wednesday of October. And both halves of that sentence were negotiated with the calendar's superstitions, because your century marries by almanac. Not May, obviously, marry in May, and rue the day, a warning so old nobody remembers its reasons and so strong the marriage registers actually dip in that month, and of the days of the week, the old rhyme is consulted half in jest and obeyed half in earnest, and Wednesday, the rhyme rules, is the best day of all. But the hour, Violet, the hour is not superstition, the hour is statute. A marriage in England may be lawfully celebrated only between 8 in the morning and noon, the canonical hours, a rule as absolute as it is unexplained to everybody who lives under it, and this is why every wedding you have ever attended has been a morning wedding. Why the breakfast that follows is called a breakfast, whatever is served at it, and why there exists in the national repertoire that particular nightmare, beloved of comic writers and actual vicars, of the wedding party racing the church clock, the bride's carriage delayed, the parson at the door with his watch in his hand, because at 1 minute past 12 the thing simply cannot be done, and must wait, license, ring, tears and all, for another day. Your century will eventually relent and move the fence to 3 in the afternoon. But that mercy is 13 years away, and so, like every bride in this story's England, you will be married in the morning, and the last Wednesday of October is given its orders. 11 o'clock, St. Helens, whose spire has stood over every day of your life and will now stand over this one. The morning itself, when it finally comes the way such mornings do, which is all at once and in fragments. Mist on the river burning off early. The house awake at 6. Hannah bringing up your tea with her eyes already brimming, which sets Kate off, which nearly sets you off. And your mama arriving in the doorway, with her face composed into the expression of a general on the last day of a long campaign, which is her way of not crying, and everyone understands this and pretends with her. The dress is white. And we should be honest over the hooks and eyes about what that means in 1873, because white is not yet the iron law the future will imagine. The Queen wore white silk and orange blossoms 3 decades ago and made it the dream, and brides of means have followed her ever since. But all over England, this same morning, sensible girls are being married in soft greys and lavenders and good dark blues, in the best dress they own or the best their mothers could make, dresses that will serve for Sundays afterward for years. And no one thinks one whit less of them. A wedding gown worn once being a proclamation of income before it is anything else. Yours is white because your papa would have it so, silk, high to the throat, close in the sleeve, and over it the veil, edged with the honiton that came home from wantage in a small parcel, and in your hair and at your breast the sprays of orange blossom, without which no bride of your century is fully dressed, white petals for purity, and the orange being a tree that flowers and fruits at once, fruitfulness, though nobody at your dressing table this morning says that part out loud. The wax buds among the real ones cool against your collarbone. Kate and Emily, your bridesmaids, are in white as well with autumn ribbons. And by the old account, the bridesmaids dress like the bride to muddle any evil spirits attending, though the only spirit attending this morning is Aunt Louisa, with a needle and thread, performing final rites upon a hem. And something borrowed is her mother's small pearl pin, fastened at your throat, with hands that are, you notice, not quite steady, and something blue is a ribbon of Kate's. And the rhyme is thus satisfied in full, and at 20 minutes to 11, your father comes to the foot of the stairs and stops, and says nothing whatever, and offers you his arm. Of the service itself you will keep, as everyone keeps, only pieces. The walk up an aisle, suddenly 3 times its usual length. Every pew turned toward you, Hannah and Joseph at the back, by right of 2 years' conspiracy, Arthur at the rail looking as though he has survived something, which he has, 19 months of it, and the vicar's voice moving through the old words at the pace of a man who knows they need no help from him. Wilt thou obey him, and serve him, love, honour, and keep him? And you say, I will. And the future will hold its breath at that word, obey, and want to know how it felt, and the honest answer is that it felt like the liturgy, violet, words worn smooth by 400 years of mornings exactly like this one. A rite so old and so communal that its edges reach you the way the river reaches the bridge, all around, and mostly underneath. With this ring I thee wed, with my body I thee worship, and with all my worldly goods I thee endow, he says. And somewhere in the third pew Aunt Louisa permits herself one dry interior remark about the worldly goods being at this moment largely settled in trust, which is her way of weeping. And then the ring is on, and the thing is done, and you walk to the vestry, a wife. And there, in the cool little room that smells of stone and hymn books, comes the moment I promised you at the beginning of the night, 18 months ago, by the clock on the wall. The register, open on the table, the verger's pen, and you sign, Violet Everett, her last appearance. The final time that name will ever be written by the hand that owns it, because the woman walking out of the vestry is Mrs. Blake. Mrs. Arthur Blake on the cards and the linen, and the girl whose name you just laid down in the book stays behind in it, between a bargeman's daughter married last Tuesday and a widower remarried in August. One line in the long ledger of the parish, which has been recording exactly this, name by name, morning by morning, since before the Armada, and will still be recording it when everyone who can remember your face is themselves a line in it. You are given the pen. It scratches. Somewhere outside the bells begin, and the bells, at least, say nothing about names. The bells just say, done, 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 over the roofs and the river and the flooded meadow where a young man taught you to skate. Back at your father's house, the company gathers, and the first room everybody visits is not the dining room. It is the parlour, because the parlour has spent this last week as a museum. The wedding presents, laid out on 2 long tables under the window, every gift with its donor's card propped against it, silver and Sheffield plate and biscuit boxes and a barometer. Arranged by your mama with the diplomacy of a Congress of Vienna, since the tables are red, violet, read closely, generosity being one more thing your world conducts in public. And each guest now files past to find their own offering and see how it has been placed. And to note, without appearing to note, what the Hartwells ran to. The grander weddings print the whole list in the county paper, column inches of epignes, but your town does its accounting in person. There are, this being a wedding in England, 3 butter dishes, there are always 3 butter dishes. It is one of the reliable comedies of the institution, and the age makes the same joke about it that the future will. And at the end of the near table, small between the silver, there is a pair of brass candlesticks for the new hall, bright as fire from polishing, with a card in a careful, upright, kitchen table hand, wishing you every happiness, ma'am, from Hannah and Cook and Joseph Tull. And if you linger longest there, in front of the cheapest thing on the table, nobody who knows anything about anything is surprised. The breakfast itself, because it is not yet noon, which is the whole joke of the institution, is ham and fowls and champagne, and a bride cake white as the dress, almonds and spirits and citron, under armour plate icing, and the cutting of it is your first official act as a married woman. Arthur's hand over yours on the knife handle. In a gesture the future will still be performing when it has forgotten every other rite in this episode. Then the cake enters the postal system, Violet. Because this is your century's most charming piece of logistics. The cake is boxed. Dozens of little white boxes tied with ribbon. A slice in each, and posted, actually posted, to every relation and friend who could not be here. Cake by rail to Wantage and Bath, and a cousin under canvas in India, so that the whole scattered map of 2 families may eat from the one cake in the same fortnight, and the unmarried girls who receive it know exactly what to do with their slice, which is not to eat it but to sleep on it, a fragment of bride cake under the pillow being licensed to show a girl her own future husband in her dreams, and Kate announces her intention of testing this doctrine tonight in a voice of pure science, and Emily catches your eye and does not laugh. Quite. There are toasts, short ones, your papa's shortest of all and the only one anybody remembers, and at 2 o'clock you go up in your wedding dress and come down in your going-away dress, dove grey, new gloves, and the carriage is at the door for the 3 to 10 train, and the whole company crowds the steps, and as the wheels move the air is suddenly full of rice, for plenty, thrown hard by people you have known your whole life, and after the rice, bouncing off the carriage door with a bang, an old white satin slipper, because shoes, by a custom nobody can explain and nobody would dream of omitting, are thrown after brides for luck, and Kate's aim, you note through the back window, is disgraceful, and Hannah's, standing beside Joseph on the bottom step with her hat ribbons flying, is true as a rifle. And the last you see of your girlhood, Violet, as the carriage takes the corner into the vineyard, is all of it standing on your father's steps in the October sun, waving your mother's, General's face finally, magnificently, in ruins. The fortnight that follows is called the wedding tour, and yours is the lakes, Windermere brown and silver in the late October light, and it is the first fortnight of your entire acquaintance, 19 months, 2 springs, 1 proposal and 1 wedding, in which the 2 of you have ever been alone together for longer than 10 supervised minutes. And that fact, which the future will find barely believable, is the plain truth of tonight, and it is why the wedding tour exists. It is the airlock, the decompression chamber, between a courtship conducted entirely in company and a marriage that must now be conducted entirely in private. In your mamma's day, a bride sometimes took her sister or a friend along on the tour itself, company to the last. And the future may make of that what it likes. You take nobody. You take walks by the water, and breakfasts that no bell summons you from, and conversations that simply do not end when a quarter hour strikes. And somewhere in that fortnight, between one lake and the next, the 2 of you meet, properly, at last, the 2 people all those chaperone Tuesdays could only sketch. And here the record draws its curtain, as the age would wish, except for one small thing seen at a distance, 2 figures on the shore path at Bowness, walking slowly, her hand on his arm, in no hurry whatever, with nobody, for the first time in this entire story, walking 2 paces behind, and then home, to the small house in East St. Helens Street with the new linen in its presses, VB in the corner of every sheet, and the last ceremony of the whole long machine. The bridal calls, the town coming, pair by pair, at the correct hour, in strict order, to be received by Mrs. Blake in her own parlour, teacups from her own trousseau, and you discover, pouring for Mrs. Hartwell, who started all this with one murmur behind a fan at a spring ball, that the room feels different from this side of the teapot, and that you are ridiculously nervous, and that some part of you is listening for your mother's step, even as you are yourself, now, forever, the lady of a house. The machine has delivered you, Violet. From front bedroom to front parlour, 19 months, all rules observed. Tonight at least we will leave you there in the lamplight, married, safe, and home. But the ledger of tonight has one page still open, and honesty was the bargain we made at the top. So before the lamps go out we must sit, briefly, where the machine failed, because it did fail, and when it failed it did something no other courtship system in history has quite done. It went to court, all over England, at the assizes, among the burglaries and the disputed wills. Juries of 12 married men regularly sit to hear an action for breach of promise of marriage, brought, 9 times in 10, by a woman against a man who proposed, was accepted, and then walked away. Because in your century, Violet, a proposal is not a sentiment, it is a contract, and its breach is actionable at law like the breach of any other, and these trials are the great tragicomic theatre of the age. The courtroom feels like a playhouse. The plaintiff appears in her quietest, saddest best, and then, exactly as your mamma promised over the needlework, the letters come out, because the letters are the evidence, the whole giddy correspondence of the engagement subpoenaed and read aloud. My own darling girl, my ever dearest Fred, 10,000 kisses, read slowly, in the flattest of legal voices, to a packed and delighted public gallery, printed verbatim in the county paper, for the enjoyment of every breakfast table in 3 shires, the most private prose 2 people ever produced, performed as public entertainment, with the author sitting scarlet in the well of the court. Juries, being married men, side with the woman far more often than not, and the damages are real, £50, 500, in celebrated cases thousands, an award calibrated frankly to what the age admits and the romances deny, that a jilted woman has lost not a dream, but a position, years, standing, market, that hearts in your century have a price the way farms do, and that somebody must pay it. High society, for the record, finds the whole institution vulgar and settles its jiltings privately, which is easy to afford when there is money for private settling, and the wits are already circling. Within 2 years of your wedding morning, London will be humming an operetta in which the entire apparatus, the weeping plaintiff, the susceptible jury, the shameless defendant, is set to music and laughed at from the stalls, and the audience laughing loudest will be precisely the people who know the thing from the inside. Because everyone knows somebody. And you, Violet, you have known somebody your whole life, and have never once heard her speak of it. A woman who was 23 in the year, a man of large promises and a smaller conscience, left her at 3 weeks' distance from her own wedding morning, linen marked, cake ordered, and who was urged by her furious brothers to bring her action, her case being, the solicitor said, as strong as scripture, the letters alone worth £300, and who looked at that solicitor across his own desk and declined, on the single ground, and she never in her life gave another, that what was in those letters had been true when she wrote it, and she would not stand in a public room while men read her heart aloud at so much a sheet. She kept the letters, though. There is a workbox in her bedroom, violet, with a lock, and a girlhood inside it, and none of you has ever seen it open. And every stitch of your trousseau these last months, the finest corners in the house, was sewn within arm's reach of it by the one member of the committee, you may as well know it now, who understood from the first Tuesday freesia, exactly, precisely, to the shilling and the scar, what the whole machine was for, and what it costs when it fails, and who checked its every bolt on your behalf for 18 months and said almost nothing, and let you call it fussing. The age will file Aunt Louisa under spinster Violet, one word. As though a life were a shelf mark, file her yourself under the truer heading, which is veteran, and when you are settled in East St. Helens Street, have her to tea on Thursdays, first of anybody, at the correct hour, in the best cup. She noticed everything. All your life. Notice her. So, what was it actually like then, Victorian courtship? Now that you have been all the way through it, ball to bells. Strip the lace off. And it was a system, engineered by a society that could not undo a marriage, for making the one irreversible decision of a lifetime as safely as slowness, witnesses, and lawyers could make it. It was conducted in public because the stakes were total, reputation the only collateral a girl could post, character the only credit report the age could run on a man, time the only test that neither charm nor fortune could cheat. It was mercenary, unashamedly. In exactly the places we are sentimental, the income audited before the heart was consulted, and it was sentimental, molten. In exactly the places we are casual, a Christian name after a year of Tuesdays landing like a kiss, a vase of freesias carrying a paragraph. Because meaning, Violet, is not destroyed by restriction, it is concentrated by it, and an age that rationed every syllable between lovers made every syllable count in a way no unrationed age can quite recover. They courted in public and loved in private, your Victorians. We have reversed it, precisely, and are in no position to condescend. And before we blow out the lamp, look at how much of it never died. The ring is still on the third finger. The father is still asked, gently, uselessly, afterwards. The banns survive whenever a registrar says, "Speak now, or forever hold your peace." The cake still goes home in little boxes. The Valentine still arrives unsigned. The lonely still advertise, hopeful and abbreviated, exactly as they did in 1870. And the chaperone, Violet, the chaperone is the one piece the future thinks it abolished. And it never did. It only dissolved her into everybody. Your friends still inspect your suitors and issue their verdicts. They simply do it after the fact, in writing, at 2 a.m, which even Aunt Louisa would concede is an improvement in comfort, if not in mercy. And so, the honours, to the couples, every pair of them, who fell in love inside a machine expressly designed to slow them down, and did it anyway, at arm's length, in full view, 15 minutes at a time, and to the 11 Tuesdays of talking about roads that every marriage of the age is quietly built on, to the mamas, generals of campaigns they were forbidden to acknowledge running, who operated the valve of the chaperonage with a precision no engineer of the century ever matched, to the gooseberries, the Kates of England, 2 paces back, studying hedgerows, keeping other people's love respectable at the cost of their own Saturday afternoons, to Emily and the 10,000 Emilys, keeping 4-year promises to curates on £90, paying for honour in the only coin that never comes back, to Hannah and Joseph, courting at the back gate under a rule that could cost her the roof over her head, and to every housemaid who carried somebody else's love letter down a dark kitchen stair with her own heart going like a watch, to the advertisers of the matrimonial news, box numbers, and brave abbreviations, who declined to be lonely, quietly, and were laughed at, and are, some of them, ancestors now of people who will never know, to the girls who said no, gently, promptly, plainly, against all advice, holding the one veto the age allowed them like a candle in a draught, to the fathers at surgery windows, doing sums with no numbers in them, and to Aunt Louisa, and every veteran like her, who took the machine's worst and then spent 30 years making its corners fine for somebody else. They were all of them working the same lane. Violet, 2 paces apart, watched, and the lane, one October morning at a time, led here, which is to say, eventually, to you, listener, because somewhere up the line of everyone now sleeping there is a pair of these people, met at a churchyard gate or a croquet hoop or a box number, who waited a year and more to use each other's names. As for you, my friend, listening in the dark on the far side of all those parlours, take the inventory. You may speak to a stranger without an introduction. Tonight, tomorrow, any time you please. You may write anything to anyone and no committee reads it. Walk out with whomever you like and no one follows 2 paces behind. Love without an audit. Marry at 4 in the afternoon on a Saturday in May, if it suits you, or not marry at all, and no drawing room in the world may reclassify you for any of it. Nobody will sue if a heart changes. Nobody is watching from the tea table. The whole vast apparatus of witnesses that governed Violet's every Tuesday has been dismissed, rank by rank, and the quiet you are lying in is the quiet of a world that finally trusts you with your own heart, which is, when you weigh it, the single most expensive freedom in this entire episode, paid for over a century by people who mostly never got to use it. The town is going to sleep now. The lamps are out along East St. Helens Street. The river is running black and easy under the bridge. The church clock has the night to itself, and in a small front parlour, a fire is banking down over its ashes with a new monogram drying on the linen press, and 2 paces behind nobody at all. The whole watched, whispering, well-meaning town has finally, gently, stopped looking. Nothing more is expected of anybody tonight. The banns are read, the letters may be written, the berries can stay on the mistletoe till morning. Let your jaw go loose, let your hands unclench. Nobody is reading anything into anything, and there is nowhere at all you are expected to be. Good night.